right there, kid. You're heading the right place.
I guess. Can't help thinking about whether we did the right.
Ain't our place to wonder. Good Lord's got us on the road, whether we choose it or not. My pop, he wasn't a religious man, you know. He couldn't grow it or kill it or eat it, and he just plain old didn't believe in it. That was it. And this one time, he hit on up the old Sabbath Hills, San Sabbath Hills. Joined up with a couple of Texas Range buddies of his to hunt. Pretty routine, you know. He'd done it like 100 times before. Should have been a 3-day kill, but on the second day, well, it all went fuck. Somehow that night, he managed to lose his buddies and top it off. And Comanches, they went and took the horses. So he was starving, and he was delirious, and he crawls up into this motte, like this group of trees out there in the middle of nowhere, just sticking up in this ocean of scrub, and he found religion. At that moment, he told me he found God. And it turns out the God, he's a squirrel. Yeah, big old meaty one. I found God, he used to say. While sitting and basking in the glory and the sublimity of mercy, I shot and ate that son of a bitch.
In The Revenant, 2015, directed by Alejandro González Iñárritu, the famous monologue by John Fitzgerald, played by Tom Hardy, occurs during a scene around a campfire where he's speaking to Jim Bridger while they eat and rest. The dialogue justifies survival instincts and ties into themes of fate and divinity. Here's the approximate transcript of Fitzgerald's spoken words from that scene. "You all right there, kid? Your head in the right place? No! Ain't our place to wonder. The good Lord got us on a road whether we choose it or not. My pop, he weren't a religious man, you know? If you couldn't grow it, kill it, or eat it, he just plain old didn't believe in it, that was it. And this one time he head on up the old Saba Hills. San Saba Hills? He joined a couple Texas Ranger buddies of his to hunt, you know? Pretty routine, he done it like 100 times before, should have been a 3-day kill, but on the second day, it all went fucked. Somehow that night he lost his buddies, and to top it off, them Comanches went and took the horses, so he was starving and delirious, and he crawls up into this motte, this group of trees out in the middle of nowhere just sticking up in this ocean of scrub, and he found religion. At that moment he told me he found God. And it turns out that God is a squirrel. Yeah. A big, old meaty one. I found God, he used to say. And while sitting there and basking in the glory and sublimity of mercy, I shot and ate that son of a bitch. Let's analyze this monologue. It's a clarification moment in The Revenant, showcasing the film's exploration of human brutality, survival instincts, and existential questions amid the harsh American frontier. I'll break down the analysis into key aspects. 1. Narrative context. The monologue occurs in a scene where Fitzgerald and the young trapper Jim Bridger, played by Will Poulter, are cooking and eating around a fire after having left the severely wounded Hugh Glass, Leonardo DiCaprio, in a shallow grave, not yet deceased. After a brutal bear attack, Glass, barely alive and unable to speak, was abandoned by them. Glass was presented by Fitzgerald to Bridger as a burden to their survival in the freezing wilderness. Fitzgerald, ever the opportunist and antagonist, uses this story, ostensibly about his father, to manipulate Bridger into accepting the fact that Glass has been abandoned to death. Fitzgerald buried him alive. The anecdote is told in a low, conspiratorial tone around a campfire, heightening the intimacy and psychological pressure. It's not just a tale, it's a rhetorical tool to justify betrayal, framing mercy-killing as a pragmatic act of self-preservation. This sets up the film's central conflict of revenge, as Glass later crawls from his grave to pursue Fitzgerald. 2. Character insight. Fitzgerald is portrayed as a hardened, cynical fur trapper scarred by frontier life, scalped by Native Americans, driven by greed, and devoid of empathy. The monologue reveals his worldview, pragmatic to the point of ruthlessness. By recounting his father's story, Fitzgerald exposes his own irreligious stance, inherited or amplified from his pop, who only believes in tangible things. If you couldn't grow it, kill it, or eat it. The casual profanity, "it all went fucked," "son of a bitch," and folksy dialect underscore his rough, uneducated background, making him a foil to the more spiritual or honorable characters like Glass, who forms bonds with nature and his Pawnee family. Psychologically, the story serves as a projection of Fitzgerald's philosophy. In a godless world, survival demands action, even violence, without moral qualms. It hints at his trauma, starvation, loss, delirium, mirroring his current desperation, but twisted into self-justification for murdering Glass's son Hawk and abandoning Glass. Ultimately, it humanizes Fitzgerald slightly, showing vulnerability beneath his villainy, while reinforcing his antagonism. 3. Thematic elements. The monologue encapsulates the Revenant's core themes of survival, nature's indifference, and the erosion of humanity in extremis. Director Iñárritu's film, inspired by real events and Michael Punk's novel, depicts the 1820s American West as a Darwinian arena where the weak perish. The squirrel story illustrates providence as brutal necessity. God, or fate, provides, but only through predation. This ties into the film's motifs of consumption, literal, eating raw bison liver, as Glass does, and metaphorical, exploiting land and people for fur trade profits. It also critiques colonialism and manifest destiny. Fitzgerald's father, a Texas Ranger hunting in Comanche territory, represents white encroachment, with the stolen horses symbolizing native resistance. Irony abounds. The ocean of scrub evokes biblical wilderness trials, but ends in sacrilegious consumption. Broader themes of revenge and redemption are foreshadowed. Fitzgerald's God-eating tale contrasts Glass's spiritual journey, where nature aids rather than is devoured. 4. Literary and cinematic devices. As a monologue, it employs anecdotal storytelling, a classic device for character revelation, similar to Quint's shark tale in Jaws. The language is colloquial and rhythmic, with repetitions mimicking oral tradition, building suspense toward the punchline. Humor arises from absurdity, the divine as a big, old meaty squirrel, creating dark comedy amid horror. Symbolically, the squirrel represents vulnerability, small, prey-like, mirroring Glass's state, while the act of eating it foreshadows Fitzgerald's predatory nature. The narrative's unreliability, did the father really say this, or is Fitzgerald inventing it, adds layers, emphasizing manipulation. 5. Theological analysis. The monologue is a profound subversion of Judeo-Christian concepts, blending blasphemy, naturalism, and existential critique. At its core, it reimagines divine revelation, Fitzgerald's father, in a state of delirium, echoing prophets like Elijah in the wilderness or Jesus in the desert, experiences an epiphany not through transcendent vision but immanent materiality. God manifests as a squirrel, a lowly, edible creature, challenging the omnipotent, anthropomorphic deity of Scripture, Genesis as creator God or the Psalms shepherd. This inverts the Eucharist, where believers consume the body of Christ for salvation. Here, salvation comes from consuming God himself, reducing the sacred to sustenance. The punchline, "I shot and ate that son of a bitch," parodies sacramental language, basking in the glory and sublimity of mercy, turning mercy into merciless predation. From a Christian perspective, this borders on heresy, equating God with creation rather than creator, pantheism or animism, and mocking prayer's efficacy. The father's pre-epiphany skepticism, "he weren't a religious man," suggests conversion through desperation, but it's a false one, faith as survival instinct, not genuine encounter. It aligns with Nietzschean ideas of God as a human projection, killed and eaten by modern pragmatism. In the film's context, it critiques institutionalized religion. Fitzgerald, a product of violent American expansion, sees God as a tool for justification, much like how Manifest Destiny invoked divine right for conquest. Yet, there's depth, perhaps a nod to process theology, where God suffers with creation, the squirrel dies to save, or eco-theology, viewing divinity in nature's cycles. However, Fitzgerald weaponizes it to endorse amorality. If God is killable for survival, so is glass. This contrasts Glass's arc, influenced by Pawnee spirituality, his visions, suggesting indigenous worldviews offer truer harmony with the divine than Fitzgerald's warped Christianity. Overall, the monologue probes how trauma distorts theology, turning God from a source of mercy into an excuse for brutality, inviting viewers to question where true divinity lies in a savage world and if there is a divinity at all in this brutal world full of death. John Fitzgerald delivers a memorable monologue about his father's encounter with a squirrel, framing it as a revelation of God's providence. To paraphrase the key elements, Fitzgerald recounts how his father, lost and starving in the wilderness, discovered a squirrel in the hollow, which he then killed and ate. In that moment of survival, his father declared he had found God, and that God was the squirrel itself, a symbol of hidden, merciful provision that sustains the faithful even in their lowest moments. Applying some points of Friedrich Nietzsche's philosophy, this monologue does not exemplify a strong will. In contrast, Nietzsche's strong will, the will to power, is vividly manifested in the film's more primal, affirmative forces, such as the bear's attack or Hugh Glass's emergence from the shallow grave. The bear represents unbridled, instinctual power. It charges with ferocious intensity to protect its cubs, embodying a noble, aristocratic vitality that acts without resentment or moral justification. It's pure affirmation of life through dominance and survival, aligning with Nietzsche's admiration for natural hierarchies and the master morality of the strong, who create values rather than react to them. Similarly, Glass, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, crawling out of his premature burial, symbolizes the triumphant overcoming of nihilism and death. Buried alive after a mauling, left for dead by Fitzgerald, Glass doesn't pray or await providence. He summons an inner force to endure unimaginable pain, hypothermia, and isolation. This is the will to power in action, transforming suffering into growth, affirming existence despite, or because of, its hardships, and pursuing revenge or justice as a self-created imperative. Nietzsche might see glass as approximating the tendency toward Übermensch, one who says yes to life in its fullest, most agonistic form, far away from the divine squirrel story revealing pure weakness. Ultimately, Fitzgerald's monologue reveals a worldview steeped in ressentiment, masking weakness as piety, while the bear and glass exemplify the strong will's raw, creative assertion and pure manifestation of force and life. Everything that cannot fully kill is able to generate a greater strength. Fitzgerald, a ruthless fur trapper driven by self-preservation and greed, delivers a monologue to the young Jim Bridger while they have abandoned the gravely wounded Hugh Glass. Fitzgerald recounts a story about his father, a Texas ranger lost in the wilderness, starving and on the brink of death. In his desperation, the father prays to God for salvation, only to spot a squirrel in a tree. He shoots it, eats it raw, and in that act, realizes the squirrel was God. Fitzgerald punctuates the tale with a crude twist: "My pa, he seen God. That squirrel there, and he ate him." The anecdote serves as Fitzgerald's philosophical justification for his actions. Survival demands pragmatism, even betrayal, because God, or providence, manifests not in mercy or morality but in raw, opportunistic necessity. There's no divine plan beyond what you seize and consume to endure. Now, to analyze this from a Nietzschean perspective, we must draw on Friedrich Nietzsche's distinction between master morality and slave morality, primarily outlined in works like On the Genealogy of Morality, 1887, and Beyond Good and Evil, 1886. Nietzsche posits that human values emerge from two fundamental psychological orientations. Master morality is the ethos of the strong, noble, and self-affirming. It arises from an overflow of vitality and will to power, where individuals create their own values based on what affirms life, strength, creativity, and excellence. Masters say yes to existence on their own terms. They are proactive, aristocratic in spirit, and unburdened by resentment. Good is what is noble, powerful, and beautiful. Bad is merely the weak or pitiful, without moral condemnation. A master doesn't rebel against gods or fate. They either embody godlike qualities themselves, as in the Übermensch ideal, or transcend such concepts altogether, forging meaning through action and affirmation. Slave morality, in contrast, is reactive, born from ressentiment, a deep-seated resentment toward the strong, the world, and one's own powerlessness. It inverts master values. What was good, strength, dominance, becomes evil, while weakness, humility, pity, and suffering are rebranded as good. This morality emerges among the oppressed, the weak, or those who feel victimized by life's harshness, often manifesting in religious or ideological systems like Christianity, which Nietzsche critiques as a slave revolt in morality. Slaves don't create, they negate and justify their impotence by demonizing the powerful and elevating their own suffering as virtuous. Their will is not strong but vengeful, seeking solace in illusions of equality, divine justice, or inverted hierarchies. Applying this framework, Fitzgerald's God-Squirrel monologue unequivocally reveals a slave morality, not a master one, despite its superficial veneer of tough, survivalist bravado. Here's a step-by-step analysis. The monologue is reactive ressentiment, not affirmative will. At first glance, Fitzgerald's story might seem like a bold, atheistic assertion of self-reliance, rejecting pious illusions in favor of gritty realism. He mocks the idea of a benevolent God, reducing divinity to a consumable resource for survival. But from Nietzsche's view, this is not the creative affirmation of a master who would embrace life's brutality without needing to desecrate or eat God as a punchline. Instead, it's a bitter inversion born from resentment. Fitzgerald's father, and by extension, Fitzgerald himself, starts from a position of abject weakness, starving, lost, and begging for divine intervention. The revelation isn't a triumphant creation of new values, it's a spiteful reaction against a God who failed to deliver mercy. Eating the squirrel god is an act of symbolic revenge. If God won't save me, I'll devour him. This echoes slave morality's pattern of negating the higher, the divine, the noble, to cope with personal impotence. A master, like Nietzsche's Zarathustra, would affirm the wilderness itself as an arena for self-overcoming, without this vengeful cannibalism of the sacred. Justification through desperation, not nobility, masters act from inner strength and abundance, they don't rationalize betrayal or greed as necessary because of external cruelties. Fitzgerald uses the monologue to excuse his abandonment of glass, framing it as pragmatic wisdom. God provides only through ruthless self-interest, so why risk yourself for the weak? But this is slave-like excuses-making. Nietzsche would see it as a symptom of bad conscience, the internalized guilt and resentment of the weak, who project their failures onto the world, or God, and then overcome them through petty inversions. Fitzgerald isn't noble, he's a scavenger, driven by fear of death, envy of others' claims, like Glass's son or the fur company's hierarchy, and a grudge against a universe that demands struggle. His strong will is illusory, it's the will of a slave who resents the masters, the resilient like Glass, and elevates his own cunning cowardice as virtue. In Nietzschean terms, true strength doesn't need anecdotes to prop it up, it simply is. The inversion of values as slave revolt, Nietzsche describes slave morality as a transvaluation of values, where the weak turn the tables on the strong through cunning and ideology. Fitzgerald's tale performs exactly this. It profanes the holy, God as a squirrel to be eaten, to valorize the base, survival through treachery. But this isn't the master's creative destruction, think of Nietzsche's call to break the tablets of old values to forge new ones. Instead, it's a resentful parody, akin to the priestly class Nietzsche critiques in Judaism and Christianity, who invert pagan strength into sin. Fitzgerald resents any higher ideal, loyalty, honor, or divine order, because it exposes his weakness, so he eats it to feel empowered. This is the essence of ressentiment, not overcoming suffering through growth, but poisoning the well of meaning to make everyone as miserable as oneself. In the film, this manifests in Fitzgerald's broader arc. He's not a conqueror but a bitter opportunist, hoarding pelts out of greed, murdering out of paranoia, and ultimately undone by his own slavish fears. Contrast with true master elements in the film. To highlight the distinction, consider Hugh Glass as a foil. Glass embodies a more Nietzschean master spirit. His revenge is an affirmation of life force, a raw will to power that transcends resentment. He endures not out of spite but through eternal recurrence-like acceptance of suffering as part of becoming stronger. Fitzgerald, however, is the slave who poisons and flees, his monologue a crutch for his fragility. Iñárritu's direction underscores this. The story is told in a dim, claustrophobic firelight, emphasizing Fitzgerald's haunted, reactive psyche rather than triumphant clarity. In sum, Fitzgerald's monologue, while masquerading as hard-boiled wisdom, exposes a profoundly slavish worldview from Nietzsche's lens.
In the right place.
It's not the strong will of a master who dances with chaos, but the whining negation of a resentful weakling.
Can't help thinking about whether we did the right.
Ain't our place to wonder. Good Lord's got us on the road, whether we choose it or not. My pop, he wasn't a religious man, you know. He couldn't grow it or kill it or eat it, and he just plain old didn't believe in it. That was it. And this one time, he hit on up the old Saba Hills, San Saba Hills. Joined up with a couple of Texas Range buddies of his to hunt. Pretty routine, you know. He'd done it like 100 times before. Should have been a 3-day kill, but on the second day, well, it all went fuck. Somehow that night he managed to lose his buddies and top it off. And Comanches, they went and took the horses. So he was starving, and he was delirious, and he crawls up into this motte, like this group of trees out there in the middle of nowhere, just sticking up in this ocean of scrub, and he found religion. At that moment, he told me he found God. And it turns out the God, he's a squirrel. Yeah, big old meaty one. I found God, he used to say. While sitting and basking in the glory and the sublimity of mercy, I shot and ate that son of a bitch. Yeah, you might want to close your eyes, kid.